from the HIV/AIDS pandemic. That's when we started researching orphans and vulnerable children. That's yes, from 1999, from 2000, and we're now in 2026. There's a lot of research fatigue now. We are researching these communities and leaving them the way we found them. Right? I go into this community of vulnerable children, I get what I want, I get my evidence, and I don't do anything. I leave them there. Yes, we want to protect all children, but some children are more vulnerable than
Yes.
others.
Yeah.
So there are children that are living outside of the biological family where they are born. Then they find themselves, for reasons that are beyond their control, their parents are either unwilling or unable to care for them. Nuclear families cannot even take care of their own children. So talk more of bringing in outside children. So the poverty situation as well in a lot of countries, economic decline,
Yes.
a lot of extended families are over, extended in terms of their capacity to take in orphans and vulnerable children from, so whereas your brother, if you pass away, would take in your children, now because of economic circumstances, they cannot do that. And those are two very important and different things, unwilling or unable. So there are parents that just feel, I don't want to have this child. That's unwilling. And then they abandon, right? And then unable, that means it's not in their capacity to be able to care for this child, whether it's poverty, whether it's disability or illness for some reason, or death, right? So they are no longer able to provide the care. So these children often end up in what is known as out-of-home care. And out-of-home care is mostly care outside of the biological family. You now become a warden of the state. You now become a child of the state. So that means the state or the government becomes your parent. And you can just imagine the trouble that comes with a government institution parenting.
Today's a fantastic day. We have a guest in front of us, and we're going to be chatting to Dr. Getty. Dr. Getty is talking to me from Hong Kong. Dr. Getty is a research assistant professor at Lingnan University in Hong Kong. Dr. Getty, welcome, and welcome to the Solomon Atta podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
It's great. I am in Cape Town. We are having a little bit of a Christmas in July type of weather. How is the weather where you are?
It's summertime now, so it's very humid.
Okay.
Humid with a lot of rain in between. I lived in Cape Town, so I know the weather. You have to prepare for like 4 seasons.
For 4 seasons.
In a day.
Always
I
4 seasons.
experienced that before. Yeah. I used to live in Cape Town, so I know a bit of what you're experiencing. But yeah, right now there's a bit of typhoon passing through China, so it's affecting Hong Kong. So it's got we've got thunderstorms in and out, but it's sunny.
Absolutely. So you're having a fantastic day. Thank you for making the time again. Today, I want to pick your brains on behalf of our audience. We're going to pick your brain. I'm going to ask you all those questions, and please help us, teach us, educate us, so that inspire us, so that we can learn from you. Every child deserves a safe and supportive environment to thrive. What does research tells us about why strong families and caring communities are so important for children's long-term development? Yay, I got it right.
You got it. Thank you so much. And that's a very powerful question to start with. But maybe a bit of more background why I feel qualified to talk about this. I come from a social work background. So my first degree is social work. So I was really focusing on child protection. So this area is something that I've been studying for over 15 years now, because I finished without wanting to show my age. But anyway, I've been studying this for quite a while. I've been studying this for quite a while. And so from social work,
Yes.
Then I did my master's in social policy because I
Mm.
was very intrigued with, okay, so how does the social work translate into policy?
Mm.
And then my PhD later on to
Yeah.
continue with that. So talking about child protection and why children need a safe environment, safe and supportive environment.
Yeah.
We bring these innocent souls into the world,
Mm.
right? They didn't ask to be born.
Mm.
So I think every adult has a responsibility to protect children.
Mm.
But research shows that there are certain children that are disadvantaged and deprived of that protection
I see.
a lot of times. And it's very, very sad because they didn't ask to be born. And I keep repeating that because
Mm.
we have a duty to protect children, but there are children that end up not getting that protection. The law states that, and by law I mean like all the regulation for child protection,
Mm.
all the charters that have been put forward, the
Mm.
Children's Act, and everything that is happening in terms of legislation, it
Mm.
tells us to protect children. But you still find children that are being abandoned, abused, neglected, being treated in so many different kind of ways. But research shows that this is more pronounced for children who experience it in their infancy. So anytime below 3 years, it's worse, right? It becomes worse in the sense that it affects brain development. It becomes worse in the sense that it affects your attachment patterns all the way through adulthood. So it's a very serious thing if any protection is lost in your infancy. Um, so my research around child protection has been focused on the failure or inability of adults to protect children. And that's why we need child protection, right? So I agree with the statement that every child deserves a safe and supportive environment
Mm.
because children are vulnerable.
Mm.
Children need protection. There's a lot of research coming out about how children have agency, children should, be independent, but there are children that will always need adult support.
Mm.
And I believe every child under the age of 18 really requires our support.
Mm.
They are vulnerable just by the fact that they're children and they require support. But research shows that in infancy, it's worse. It gets better developmentally as they get older because now they can think for themselves and maybe make decisions for themselves.
Mm.
But before that, we need to protect them.
You see, it seems like this is a very serious, from the way you are explaining, Dr. Getty, it's making me think quite a lot because you can even see, even parents, even like the way they hit a child, these are children that are in homes. But what about the ones that are not even in homes? Could you just stay on that a little bit and just talk through the ones that are not even in homes, that are in
Yeah.
actual, that belong to homes?
Yes, and that is an area I've been very passionate about because, yes, we want to protect all children, but some children are more vulnerable than
Yes.
others.
Yeah.
So there are children that are living outside of the biological family where they are born. Then they find themselves, for reasons that are beyond their control, their parents are either unwilling or unable to
Mm.
care for them. And those are two very important and different things, unwilling or unable. So there are parents that just feel, I don't want to have this child. That's unwilling. And then they abandon, right? And then unable, that means it's not in their capacity to be
Mm.
able to care for this child, whether it's poverty, whether it's disability or
Mm.
illness for some reason or death,
Yeah.
right? So they are no longer able to provide the care. So these children often end up in what is known as out of home care.
Mm.
And out of home care is mostly care outside of the biological family.
Mm.
You now become a warden of the state. You now become a child of the state.
Yeah.
So that means the state or the government becomes your parent.
Mm.
And you can just imagine the trouble that comes with a government institution parenting. That's not their job. It's not private. It's now a public institution taking over the role of parenting. So there are a lot of problems with that system, and I've been studying that system because it protects children. It's there for a reason. So they take in these children that parents are unable to take care of. They put them in these facilities.
Maybe foster care or facilities, yeah.
Yeah, so it's foster care or it's institutions where it's residential. So they stay in dormitories or family settings. Lately, African countries are moving towards, making them like family setups, but it's still an institution. But then they give you like a father and a mother, but it's still not your blood relations.
Yes.
Yeah. So you have caregivers as your parents, right? So they try and mimic a family setup where there's lesser kids, maybe
some kind of
semblance
of
kind
family.
Of normalcy. Yeah, some kind of normalcy. Yes. So imagine that is happening in your infancy. You're born into that. You're abandoned at birth, and then you grow up in that system. That's all you know. All you know is being raised by non-relatives. Strangers, but then they don't become strangers to you because this is all you know.
These are the only people you know. Yes,
these are the only people you know. So I have gone through trying to actually rethink and redefine what family is, because for these children, if I was born into this, I don't know a biological mother or a biological father.
Yeah,
my caregiver is my parent.
Yes.
Even though they're not related to me by blood.
Yes.
But we don't call that family. But my research has shown that these kids, especially after prolonged separation from the biological family, the non-relative is my family.
Yes, because that is the experience that is their lived experience, isn't it? That is
their lived experience, and that's all I know. So it's not written in any law that this parent has rights to me.
Oh.
Right? They are just temporary caregivers. And the way the system is set up, they do shifts. So you're constantly then changing caregivers, which disturbs, the flow of relationship.
Could be even disorienting. Yeah, you have to refamiliarize yourself with the new parental structure, or if you a home structure or whatever. But just drill down a little bit for me in terms of, I understand that you did your research at UCT, if I'm not mistaken. What did you find specifically that is commonplace around how the research showed you?
Yeah. So my research was actually at UCC in Ireland. Okay. Not UCT. So UCC, it's an institution in Ireland. That's where I did my master's degree. So what I found, I was talking to those that grew up in these institutions and then left.
I see.
So these are now adults. So they were thinking retrospectively about their experiences of growing up in these institutions. So they leave at 18 according to the law. Once you turn 18, you're an adult, you must go.
Okay.
So imagine yesterday I was 17, I turn 18 today.
And you no longer have a parent.
I need to go. So that's where the system misses it, because the system is meant for children. Once you turn 18, you're an adult. How do we make sense of that? You're the only family that I know. And now I have to go where? I don't know anybody outside. And this is very different from foster care, right? Let me clarify. So foster care is where they try and match you with families. So you stay in an actual like family setup out in the community. That's a different thing altogether. In the institution setup at 18, most of them have to leave, particularly in African countries where my research has been focused. They have to leave at 18. You don't know anyone. You probably were abandoned at birth, as I said, some cases. So there's been no family that you know. Then they let you go at 18. You're an adult.
It's a new form of abandonment, as it were. Now you were abandoned by your biological parents, And then now you are being abandoned also by the state and by society, so to speak. There's a new
That's
form of
it.
abandonment.
Where do you belong? Where do you belong? Because even whilst they're in care, in school, they are labeled as, oh, the children of the institution.
Mm.
Some even still call them orphanages,
Stigmatized.
which is still, yeah, which is still a very backward word to use, orphanages, because some of them are not even orphans. Some of them are abandoned and they have parents who are just unwilling to care for them.
The linguistic
Um,
difference. Yo.
yes. So, but you're all labeled the same, right?
Mm.
I have a paper that I wrote where, like, why do you call me an orphan when I have parents? But the
Mm.
moment you're in that institution,
You get
you're
grouped.
you're labeled an orphan because your parents are absent. So I was very interested in finding out how do they define family? What does
Mm.
family mean to them, and who is family for them?
Yeah.
And that was very meaningful research that I feel for me, just hearing their stories and for them to say
Imagine.
the institution caregivers, they saw them as family.
Mm.
They saw those people that were coming in, giving them food, because what is family? We share experiences, we eat
Yes.
together,
Yeah.
we play together, we pray together.
Mm.
So how they were defining family, even though it's not blood, was
Mm.
very much we do things together. So they're my family, and that's all I know. If I don't know this biological type of family that you're trying to tell me about,
Yeah.
I
You
can't
know,
call them family.
mm, funny enough, this morning while I was thinking about our conversation, I started looking at the at two words or three words: being and belonging, and being and belonging. And I was just trying to make sense of it, whether you can
Hmm.
be but not belong, whether you can belong and not
Mm,
be. And it was very troubling how my brain was taking me around. So in
yeah.
terms of how society now deals with when they leave the institution, it's like you are now on your own. Is that like a process of you can be upgraded or that's it
They're pretty much left on their own.
on their own? Thank God.
Um, Literally some of them on their 18th birthdays, I'm saying. So it's so abrupt. And then you have to leave, you're an automatic adult. Whereas for some of us who grow up with our birth families, I can be 30 and still in my mother's house,
Of
or I
course.
take, yeah, if things don't work out, I can go back, you know. They don't
Yes.
have anywhere to go back to when things don't work out in society. They don't have,
And
so
if
what I always,
fall
mhm,
back on plan.
yes. So I have a lot of my participants that ended up in the streets,
Mm.
homeless because I have nowhere to go. And that's the gap in the system where, unless you manage to trace their biological families from maybe 15 years ago, 10 years
Mm.
ago when they were abandoned,
Mm.
they're
No.
going in the streets. They have nowhere to go. Some of them don't even know their background. Some of them don't even know why. Because if I was abandoned as an infant,
Mm.
and there's this thing particularly in the Zimbabwean setup where I was studying,
Mm.
where they are not given access to their records. So I don't even know why I was in the institution. So I don't have my own history and I don't have anyone I can talk to
That can be
about it.
really traumatizing.
It
That can
is.
be
So when I was talking
extremely
to them,
traumatizing. Yeah.
some of them actually said, this is the first time someone asked me this question, and I don't even know how I got here. I know I was abandoned. Yes, I have sessions with my social worker, but I don't know my family.
And
So
what would
are
be the
there
reason?
efforts?
Yeah, what would be the reason for
Mhm.
withholding their histories, their personal histories from them by the state or by the institution?
Mm. Some of it, we say it's protection. We're trying to protect them from the pain,
Yeah.
but it's also then causing secondary harm because you're protecting, but you're also adding to it
New
because
form
now
of.
I've got questions.
Mm.
I've got questions that I have no one to ask those questions, and no one can answer those questions for me. Let me see my file. A lot of them said, let me see my file. And those files, they're not privy to them. They can't give them their file to see, okay, I was abandoned or I was abused and whatever. But these are now like adolescents
Mm.
to like 18 years. I can think for myself, like you can protect me to a level, but at least let me know where I can start the search once I have to leave the institution. So there's a lot missing in terms of participation in decision making. They have to play an active part in the decision making about where they're going to go, because just letting them go like that, then they are in the streets, there's no care. We don't have an aftercare policy in a lot of African countries. I actually have been trying to find, there's no country in Africa that has an aftercare policy, like an active one, to follow them up after they leave and
After they leave the
provide support.
institution.
Yes. So it's pretty much once you become an adult, you're done. In the developed world, Australia has done that. They now extend the years at which they should leave. So at least up to 21 or up to 23, you don't leave at 18. So to give you that adjustment period, right? Maybe you now start university and they're continuing to support you. Not to say you're 18, you're now an adult, you must go. But then it goes back to an issue of resources. Some of the countries that I'm talking about, they don't have the resources to continue supporting because there's so many kids entering the system every year. So to continue supporting the ones that have aged out, they say it's capacity. They don't have the capacity.
I see.
Yeah, but I feel like, so what is the point of child protection? And this is the question I've been asking. We claim to protect, so you protect them up to a certain period and then you decide we're done. Because with the normal family, and I hate to use the word normal, with the biological family setup, if you grow up in your family, there's no cutoff where, unless it's some families where they're so strict, they cut you off at 18. But you have an option to go back home if things don't work out.
But that's really hardly, that's an anomaly in the continent. I mean, from a lived experience, that in Africa, you are welcome back home. You are a child and you are a child. I mean, if your father and if your parents are still alive, your aunties and uncles, you're always a child. They're not going to, even if you've grown up and getting married or whatever has happened, you remain a member of that family. Let me just see if I can evolve it a little bit and say, across Africa, many children grow up outside traditional family settings. How can governments, communities, and social institutions better support children in alternative care and help them transition successfully into adulthood? I think this is something that you've already kind of started touching on, but I think part of it you want to tease out. Because for me, it seems contradictory with the African way of life, if there's anything like that, that Africa believes a lot in communal livelihoods, in communal settings, and etc. How is it that African children are seen to be existing outside of this communal space?
Because in the African setting, there should be no orphan, right? If we go back to our traditions, there is no orphan because we have a communal way of parenting. It takes a village to raise a child. So there's no child that should ever feel like I don't have a home. But with modernization and everything that has happened, right? So nuclear families cannot even take care of their own children. So talk more of bringing in outside children. So the poverty situation as well in a lot of countries, economic decline, a lot of extended families are over, extended in terms of their capacity to take in orphans and vulnerable children from, so whereas your brother, if you pass away, would take in your children, now because of economic circumstances, they cannot do that. They have their own little family to feed and all of that. Migration is also coming in there because a lot of families are now separated, looking for greener pastures, which is creating another problem, right? Because then now we don't have that extended family setup. It's creating a whole lot of more vulnerable children. But you asked what governments can do. I think the starting point is really to go back. And a lot of scholars have started to promote. Let's go back to the old way of doing things. Let's decolonize, right? Institutions and orphanages and all of that that's not our way of life anyway.
Good.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Because I'm thinking
we never had.
Does it fit snugly? Does that system seems very different from the way
Western think.
Yes. Is the Western system fitting snugly? It's not, from what you are saying
It's
from
not.
your research. Yeah.
It's not. And it also creates, once these adults go back into society after being raised in the institution, they don't belong there because they've been raised in a very different setting and they struggle to fit in. They struggle to feel like I'm one with people that have grown up with their parents. So there's just a lot going on there. And they're shunned and they're shamed and there's a lot of discrimination across the board. And it doesn't help that they have a lot of trauma and, issues that they're carrying. And then you go into society, you react obviously because of your trauma. You're already used to being abandoned, abused, and neglected, and then you face this discrimination. So we need to go back to, I don't even know if it's possible. I know we idealize the past and say, let's just go back. But we did not have institutions before. The orphanages and stuff were brought in through Christianity and the church and everything. That those were the first institutions that they brought to, let's help these kids that need. Then they started creating these institutions and taking children from their families. We didn't have that. So if we can go back to supporting families so that they're never separated in the first place.
Yeah.
Families are being separated because of poverty. As I said, not every child in the institution is an orphan. They have parents who are either unwilling or unable to support. So provide the support that they need so that separation is not an option.
Yes, it's prevented.
So preventative measures.
Dr. Getty, this question is in my mind. What is it that produces unwillingness for parents? I want unable, we can kind of attribute it to maybe disability, like you mentioned earlier, and various other factors. But can you stay a little bit on the unwilling part that contributes to the problem from its origin? What would have made a parent unwilling? What is the research saying?
It's a very tricky one because then let's say the parent is also going through mental health problems. And in Africa, we're not there yet. We say that's a Western thing. We don't do, mental health. We don't get depressed here. We're Africans, right? But the reality is at some point, someone might decide, I don't want this.
I'm not interested.
Yes. So like in Hong Kong, in East Asia, where I'm living now, there's a child-free kind of mentality where people just decide, I don't want to have kids. I'm not made for this. I don't want to have kids. And they make that decision. So at least they are making the decision before
they have the kids. Yes, that makes sense.
Before they have the kids. So the people that make the decision after they have kids, they realize after the fact that they're not parents. They're not cut out to be parents. Unfortunately, then it's after the fact. So then they think, instead of me abusing this child, let me give them to someone who will take care of them. Another thing is also like young kids, teenage pregnancy, right? That can also be unable, but it can be unwilling as well, because I had a child, it's a I don't want to say mistake because that sounds wrong as well. It's unplanned. It's an unplanned pregnancy. I don't want it, right? So those are mostly the abandonment cases, because then it happened, it wasn't planned. I don't want to have this. And then the man disappears. They say abort the child, so they're not supporting. So I'm unwilling to go through this by myself. It's actually not as common as the unable, fortunately.
Yeah.
The ones who relinquish, it's actually called relinquishment, where you relinquish I give to someone else and say, I can't do this. So I relinquish my care and everything to someone who is
capable,
more willing than me.
More willing.
Yeah, more willing than me. So I freely give you this child to take care of.
Very, very interesting. I don't know what came
but
to
it's not common.
Yeah,
it's not common in our context. It's mostly inability in our context. Yeah.
Social policy is often viewed as government responsibility alone. What role should businesses, universities, faith communities and civil society play in creating more inclusive and caring society? Is this question asking us to be more human or what?
In a way, it is. But also to move away from looking at government as, they have to deal with everything. But I must maintain that government has a big role to play.
Yes.
Because they are the ones that come up with the policies. They are the policymakers. They are the ones that put in, into place like how we deal with things through policies. They need to be able to admit when they can't do something and allow other actors to come in and do the work.
Non-state actors.
Non-state actors, yeah. And so you talk about your collaborative kind of governance, right? We need more collaborative governance through public-private partnerships, community interventions. With children, particularly community interventions have been found to work.
Yes.
Because then we're not removing children from their communities.
Yes.
Because we found evidence that they don't thrive outside of the community. We want to keep them in the community. What is missing is the support to the community that is willing. So if the community says we want to take these children in, these vulnerable children in, they need support. But what we're seeing a lot is that government funding is not often going to these kind of interventions, right? So unless you have a health project or something that is trending, within the public health or whatever, so you kind of need to fit your funding proposal to whatever is trending.
Within a certain niche that is currently on government's radar at that time.
Not just to say I'm taking care of vulnerable children. There's not much support for that. The grannies have been doing it for years in the communities and they're not getting any support for that. So we really need a way to support the ones that are already doing it, because the work is already happening in the communities. It's just not being highlighted and supported because maybe they don't have the structures where they can apply for the funding. They don't have an organization, but they're helping. They are doing the work to actually stop these children from being removed. And they don't have capacity. You find grannies taking care of like 10 grandkids or other kids from the extended family without any support. So it's recognizing these informal structures. Kinship care has become a very big deal in other countries. South America, we see a lot of kinship care. Even in China, we see a lot of kinship care in so many different countries.
Yes.
And they've done away with institutionalization of children. They're not removing children and placing them in institutions because they're not now focusing more on community initiatives. But these initiatives need to be funded. I don't know what kind of messaging the government needs to be able to see the impact that is being done on the ground and supported. Because it seems as if as long as you have an organization or an NGO, that's how you get support. But these grannies have been doing this. These aunties have been doing this.
Without any paperwork, without any...
Yes, it's informal, but it lacks support. So we need to redefine, first of all, the whole child protection system. I think it needs an overhaul. Because a complete overhaul, because they have social workers. They need to work hand in hand with the community.
Yeah.
And they're trying to do that in some countries where they've got child protection committees and all of that. But at the end of the day, these committees are just there for, I don't know, sometimes, a photo op. They want to take pictures and say we went there.
Like real work when that is like something comes up like a month of child rights day or something similar to that. Just within that period, that's when you get to see this in a news reel, and that's like 20 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, however the news people want to segment it for. But it's only through these kinds of conversations that we can drill really deep into evidence-based work that has been done by academics, so that a longer conversation can be had around these kinds of issues. So
because the life of a child, the life of a child is longer than the 20 minutes that you're saying. Like they need to wake up. It's the lived experience and it's layered.
I like the way you put it. The life of a child is really longer, even more than the 18 years. And I mean, like in the cases where you say some countries have gone to about 23 years, that allow that those 5 years, because when you actually turn 18, that's when a few more things start to make sense. And that
How
period.
many of us knew what we were doing at 18?
Yeah, but of course, I'm not saying people don't, but I'm just saying that the things that you knew before the 18 and the things that you know after the 18 are actually a little bit different across and from person to person. Research in social work often reveals challenges that remain invisible to the wider public. How can academic research influence policy and ensure that vulnerable children and families are not left behind?
Mm-hmm. And I find that a very important question because I think academics are also doing a bad job in a way of there's a lot of research fatigue now. We are researching these communities and leaving them the way we found them, right? I go into this community of vulnerable children, I get what I want, I get my evidence, and I don't do anything. I leave them there. I'm touched
Dr.
by their
Getty, say that
stories.
again. Say that again, please.
Yeah, so there's a lot of research fatigue within these communities, particularly with vulnerable children. If you think back from the HIV/AIDS pandemic, that's when we started researching orphans and vulnerable children. That's years from 1999, from 2000, and we're now in 2026. How much research has been done on vulnerable children? And we go into these communities, into these institutions. Yes, we're touched by their stories, but as researchers, we also need to challenge ourselves that I've taken this story, I've written about it, I've published my papers.
You had
The
your
life of this
promotion.
child, the life of this child or this community remains the same. What am I doing about that? So I'm saying that to introduce the idea of impact, right? And that's why a lot of researchers have to really challenge themselves. It's not just, I don't want impact in terms of writing publications, because in reality, maybe 12 people are going to read my papers who are interested in that topic, right? Maybe a few people are going to read the book that you're going to write on this topic, mostly academics. So we're reading this in our small groups, our small privileged groups. How many times are we taking the findings back to the community, talking to these groups and saying, look, we did this research, this is what we found, what can we do about it? Then you do the next project that is now changing things, right? It needs to be a build up from, don't just go collect data and you write your paper and you're done with the community. Because I've been working with the same group of caregivers for several years, and they have that fatigue. And they've told, when I was trying to make way into this community, initially they said, we're tired. We've seen so many researchers. What's going to make you special? Like we've done this. So you are challenged as a researcher to say, what have I done for these people? Their stories are touching. These are children who have gone through trauma. It's not even funny, like they've been abandoned, abused, traumatized before coming into the institution. The whole separation experience was traumatic. I'm separated from whoever gave birth to me. Now I'm in this institution. There's a lot going on again within, because there's abuse, there's neglect going on in there, lack of staff members. There's a lot going on in the institutions themselves that I can't even get to. That will need another hour.
Yeah, you will come back. You will come back for a follow-up, because I think some of these things, and you say something that's really important, because this is why we conceptualize this podcast to say, academics, they do this research. Who is hearing it? Who is really hearing it? Because I understand from the tiny piece of knowledge that I have around these things is that academic papers are written for peers. They are written for people that are only within your discipline. For those that get to see, like you've correctly pointed it out. But if you come onto a podcast like this and you share this information, someone might just hear a piece of it that might inspire them to just do things differently. Just say someone's an undergrad now or someone that's in an NGO sector, et cetera, et cetera. They can hear something that might trigger something in their mind that they can do things differently.
Yes. So it's going beyond doing research for papers for a thesis for now we want to do research that is impactful, but how do you measure that impact? You're going back into these communities and actually working with them. It's not about you getting promoted or getting the title or whatever. Do you really care about the communities you're researching? And this is a challenge for researchers, right? I myself, I'm challenging myself with that because yes, you've written the papers. It needs to go beyond that. Are you creating opportunities? Because for example, like the care leavers that I've been working with, they need opportunities. They've been put out on the street. I go collect data from them, I leave them on the street. So at some point, if I'm not working after that to create a transition for them, then what is the point of my research? What
I
is
really
the
like
point
the
of my
research
work?
fatigue thing that you mentioned. That research fatigue aspect that you mentioned, and I've also had other academics mention something similar, not in the exact same, not in verbatim, but in that they're saying when you collect your data, that's it. The people, they are no longer part of your radar. You don't see them anymore. They become almost invisible because you've gotten what you want. But my question is just in general terms, not specific to your discipline or field of study, is it because the framework of knowledge production itself is a challenge that is how it's done? Or is it that, because my question is more around, why is it recommendation in research and not solutions? And not that this needs to be done like this.
Practical.
This is what you found out. These are the solutions. And because when you recommend is almost up.
It's a dream. Yeah, it's aspirational.
Why is it not solutions? Why is it not that after you've done the research, these are the solutions? So if someone wants to take any action around the research, these are the specific nitty-gritty pieces that they need to address.
Yes. To be fair, some universities have started, insisting that you need a model for intervention to graduate with your master's or PhD research by research. So that will be your master of philosophy or your PhD. So they're now insisting, I know University of Zimbabwe is doing that. I don't know about other universities. Your thesis needs to have a model at the end. So you're not just writing a bullet list of recommendations. You're coming up with a model to change things. Yes. So someone reading that would then be like, oh, okay, someone proposed a model to change, maybe to work with grandmothers in the community to support orphans and vulnerable children. This is the model that they propose. Let's now do a study to see how feasible that model is. So now you need to come up with a model to graduate. So I think it's just slow, but it's in the works. I think we need to do more in terms of curriculum development to go towards that, particularly in African countries, to go towards really ensuring and emphasizing that researchers, you don't graduate until you have a practical solution, particularly for us in the humanities.
Why are we not leapfrogging? I mean, the university system has been around since Oxford was founded in 1096. Why are we not leapfrogging? Even with AI in our age, we can build models almost quickly. We can, the data that we've collected, the lived experience, I mean, we can then leapfrog in terms of saying we have to go again at maybe that's when I'll ask you at the end, if you had the cheese, if you had all the cheese in the world and you wanted to start a university, why would you change? Okay. Families are changing across the world because of migration, something that you have mentioned, urbanization and economic pressures. How should societies rethink the meaning of family while preserving the relationships that give people security? And my favorite word, belonging.
Belonging. Families are in a state, and I don't want to be so to sound catastrophic when I say this, but it seems like families are in a state of decline.
They are.
Some people say they are not, but I'm on the other side. Yes, I'm arguing that they're declining. There's so much moral decay as well that is affecting families. There's so much, this social media, the discipline issues in families, the migration, modernity itself has changed the way parenting is even happening. So family dynamics have shifted, and we want to copy, Western ways of doing family. We want to act as if we're Western. We think that's the best way to raise children. We're doing naughty corners as well and things like that, following what's happening on social media and all of that. My thing is, we need to rethink, and I'll go back to decoloniality and like really thinking about how we can decolonize. How can we redefine family and go back to our cultural values? What did family mean when we were, the idea of Ubuntu, and in Shona it's Ukama, where it's relationality. It's like I'm saying, even children wouldn't suffer in those settings because everyone is taking care of everyone. It's brotherhood, it's unity. But I think poverty complicates that, right? Poverty brings in a whole new dimension because now I'm looking for me and my own family. I have to get them out. I'm trying to go to Canada. I'm trying to go to Australia to take care of my small nuclear family. I can't be worried about other people. But I want to say positively that African people, even in diaspora, there's still a little bit of remittance going back. So we still care about the ones we leave behind. But there are so many gaps. There's so many gaps. Even after we migrate, there are children being left, falling in the cracks because obviously then each one is looking out for their own. We're becoming more individualized instead of communal. So if you can go back to...
Let me just kind of enjoy the conversation by saying a thing that might not make sense. I want you to deal with two things for me, Dr. Getty. The one is that is the fragmentation that we're experiencing around the world or generally, is it also affecting the family? That is the one piece. And how does that affect the African concept of it takes a village to raise a child? That philosophy of it takes a village to raise a child, what has happened to that?
So instead of saying, does it affect the family? That's taking an external view. I believe it starts with the family. Okay. So when our families become fragmented, we are now projecting what is happening in the home. So when the home is not okay, that's why we have all this chaos, because we no longer have our socialization where we're training our kids in the home the way we used to. We're no longer keeping, the values in the home. Previously, the home was the center. Now we're externalizing everything. So it's not these external forces happening to us. It's the breakdown starting with the family, because we're broken down. The center cannot hold, to quote, who wrote Things Fall Apart? The center
Chinua Achebe.
Hold. Yes,
Chinua Achebe, yeah.
Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. So the family is the center, I believe.
Yes.
So if we go back, so everything is starting from the home. That's why they say charity begins at home. So if we start with our families, if we start reconstructing, fixing whatever is going on, because I believe even substance abuse, even everything that is happening with our youth, everything can be sorted out in the family. If we support families, then we can fix society, because society is made up of families.
Yes.
Countries are made up of families.
Yes.
But we've managed to externalize the issue as if, oh, that's a government issue or whatever. If the home is in order, then each output of that home is going to step out into society and do great things. So to this day, those that are still managing to raise their families well, you see them doing great things. Out there. They are the few.
When you say it like that, it makes a lot of sense to my understanding, because some families are still solid to the core and their value in society is immense. Their contribution to society is immense, just from the way that they are locked into a family value that is powerful. But I'm still trying to make sense of what has caused. Is it capitalism that has made family to become so individualistic instead of communal, instead of relational? What is it that has fragmented the African family? And what is amazing to me is that even in political conversations, you don't hear politicians really centering the family as a core part of nationhood. They don't really talk about it. They don't talk about the African family or the African they don't talk about it. They don't emphasize it. And politicians happen to be the ones that have a lot of the time constructing discourses on society. So what is fragmenting the African society from the African family, from which all of these challenges around your research are coming from?
Yeah. And that's a very good question. And our politicians don't even recognize that the family is that fragmented, right? They probably think everything is fine or they're in denial, right? I think I've been trying to write a paper that I'm really trying to, recenter the family and looking back at the history of where things went wrong. It begins with colonization and how they came to dismantle our traditional ways of knowing, our cultural systems, our knowledge systems. Family was part of that, right? So it's westernization, it's modernity, it's everything. So we started taking things, right? Whatever the white men brought to try and demonize our ways of life, because we were very communal, we had these big families and everything, and now we started to have these nuclear families. That was not the norm for us, right? So when families started moving into the nuclear, small family, each man for himself,
started ordering even
that's
family.
when
part of the family becomes the order.
Exactly. So now we're separating those who have, those who do not have, and the poorer family members will be looking up to those ones that are making more to always be like begging, and they're always avoided. So capitalism comes into that, where you try and separate yourselves and you're calling them like, oh, these are leeches, but those are your family members. Back in the day, they used to live in one compound, sharing all resources, right? So modernity did bring technology and all these fine things, but it also really dismantled our way of life. And with that came a lot of trying to copy Western ways of doing things. And westernization is individualism. It's trying to look for what I can do for myself. But unfortunately, it's also allowed us to leave children vulnerable
behind.
Children that need care are being left vulnerable in that situation.
Let's try and see if we can look into 2050, like into a crystal ball. What are the biggest social challenges facing African children and families, and what investments should countries make today to build stronger communities for the future generations?
If I had a crystal ball. I think, looking at now and the way the world is going, technology and all of that, unless we adapt, we're probably, not going to fit into where the world is going. But we're also, on the contrary, saying, let's go back to the past, because we're romanticizing the past and saying it was better. We need to find a way to bring in the positive aspects of our communal life and try to redefine them in the new age. How would that look like if we try and create communities with these new structures, and still maintain our cultural values, if we even want to maintain those? I think because for my field, which is child protection and trying to protect children, if we want, because the way it's looking for the Gen Zs and, the children that are going to be born after, and it's really scary to think about what kind of world they're going to be living in. And they're going to be the future generation, the future leaders and all of that. But if you look at them now, they're focusing more on, getting big online, celebrity lifestyle and all of those things. So our values have shifted completely. I think with globalization and everything that is happening, we are unfortunately affected by what is happening on the global stage.
Yes, absolutely.
And if the global stage is going, unless we go back to communism, I don't know how we can, go back to our romanticized past, because we're clearly past that,
But
right?
I think maybe it's because we live in a society that has been influenced by capitalism and democracy. I see a lot of conversation on this podcast have pushed back hard on democracy. Dr. Tapelo Telapedi, his episode is going to play very soon, I think this month. He's arguing that we haven't really tinkered. He drops a word and says we haven't tinkered with the system of liberalism to see if it served us well. So we cannot really get stuck as a continent or as a people only adopting something that elsewhere it has been shown that it has not really served people in a particular way, especially when we can also, through research, see what it has done to us. And why do we still keep on keeping on this path when we can see from academics like yourself what it hasn't served us well or given us the desired outcomes?
You see where we're going now, like what is happening in China and in the US and these other developed nations. We're going to be placing our parents in residential homes because we're like, I don't have time to take care of my elderly parents. But that has not been our culture.
No.
But that kind of setup where someone might feel like, I don't need to be taking care of my elderly parents, I need external help. We are also now getting to that. So if our families have become so fragmented in that sense, where care has changed its meaning, each one is kind of looking for, even couplehood, it's part of families. It's broken down. Marriages are in decline. People don't want to get married. People don't, the fertility is still a bit better in Africa compared to other places, but it's still in decline, right? Compared to previous years. So what we're seeing is really, if we keep on copying the modern life, we are really losing more than we're gaining. What we really need is to remember that societies are made up of families. And if we do not invest in families, strengthening families to keep them together, I don't know if we can stop divorce rates or migration or anything else that is separating families. But we need to start having the conversation of where exactly did we go wrong in terms of our families.
Dr. Getty, we are almost going to wrap. This is a very, very wonderful conversation, and I'm learning a great deal from here, from you. And I believe that our audiences would also enjoy it. Throughout your career in social work and social policy, what has studying families, children, communities taught you about resilience, compassion, and the kind of society we should aspire to build?
That's a very good question. My studies have mostly focused on dysfunction, when families break down, because now when you see children being removed, that means family has broken down. But one thing I've seen is how resilient children and young people that are in these situations can be. They are finding ways to survive. They are finding, as I said, new ways to define what family means for them. And it's actually in line with what is happening globally, where people are redefining what family is anyway. Now we have a concept known as chosen families, where you can choose, or blended family. So you choose who you want your family to be. And so your friends can be family now. Family is what I choose for it to be, right? Whoever has been there for me, showing me support, showing me care for a prolonged period of time, that is my family, and I can look at you as family. My best friend can be my family.
Without knowing. I
It's
have
actually
used that without
founded.
knowing it. Yes. without having this
Yeah.
deepened understanding. Someone that I've known, like people have known people for like 2 decades, 2.5 decades, so your whole life
Yes.
from kindergarten or from crèche, and they've stayed with you all along. You've done all the
That's your
things that have
family.
happened. They become family. This is what you're saying.
Yes. It's supported by evidence. There's actually evidence to support that you are now able to choose who your family is. It's subjective. It's an experience. I experience you how you show up for me. So what I found in my research, these children that have been abandoned, abused, gone through a lot of trauma, they are also redefining. And these are children in Africa who probably didn't know these definitions that were made probably in the West and all these researches, but they're doing the same in the African context. They are choosing, this person has been there for me more than my biological mother has been. You are my family. That's how I define who family is. Some are even taking it further in Europe to call pets family, but that's another that's another thing.
Yes, that's
So
another
the dog is a
dimension.
family
Yeah.
member, a cat is a family member, but so family becomes who you say
No, but
family is.
I have a dog, and I think she's a
Is
family
it a
member.
family member? You
Yes,
see?
because
So okay.
when no, this is serious. If I may, no, if I may, because
Our
my
dogs live
dog,
outside,
my dog
separate.
Zaga is a family member. You are not going to tell me
Okay.
anything different, because he is here all the time. I got him I got her when she was a puppy. So
Yeah. And you'll be charged if anything happens to your pet. So
absolutely.
there's a body of knowledge that supports even pets being supportive members of your
Look, you
family.
see.
And you see, so no one is without family support if you look widely. So what we need in the African context is to broaden our definition. Because what we have back home is a very narrow understanding now because of what has happened. Yeah. So now it's by blood. That's how we say, okay, I was born by this person, so they are my family. We have a very limited view academically, but I know in reality, people do have friends that have been
Yes,
in their lives for many years.
yes,
We just need more empirical evidence of that so that we can write it into, to say, okay, this
okay,
is also
literature.
existing. But
Yeah.
if it's not written and documented, no one is going to believe that it's also within Africa. But I know it's happening, but it's anecdotal evidence. We haven't written on it.
Dr. Gacy, as we wrap, if someone were to watch just 3 minutes, and one of the key things that I've taken away so far is our concern or your concern as an academic and the fragmentation of family and how that then has all these problems of children that are not getting the care that they deserve, or children that are not growing up in families, even if they're not biological, etc. If someone were to watch just a minute of this conversation, what should they take away?
I will repeat that societies are made of families. We need to do more to strengthen our families in order to protect the children that are within our societies. If we do not do more to strengthen families, a lot more children are being born outside of the system and they are without care and they need care and they are vulnerable. For those that find themselves without any family support, we need to extend the definition of support and look to external. We don't need to look at blood only. There's so many other definitions of who family can be and who can provide love, care, support, and belonging. So belonging is not just about blood relations. It can extend to so many other relationships. Let's put those relationships into law. Let's recognize them and legitimize them and also support them if they are caring for children.
Dr. Gacy, thank you so much for being on the Solomon Atta podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.